Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about doctrine in Hinduism. So this is where we talk about the theology of the religious tradition, and in our first prezi, the written one where we went over the dimensions of religion, this is where we talk about whether it's a monotheism, polytheism, henotheism, pantheism, etc. And one thing to know before we start with Hinduism is that Hinduism doesn't necessarily fit neatly into just one of these categories. Because Hinduism has this sort of dual emphasis on the unity and the oneness of truth, and also on diversity and a tolerance for many understandings of that truth, you could claim that Hinduism is any one of these different theologies, that it's monotheistic, it's pantheistic, it's henotheistic, it's polytheistic. So instead of defining Hinduism as just one of these theisms, we're going to talk about ways that it could be understood as multiple of these. And what I want you to know is how each claim has merit. So we're not going to confine Hinduism to just one theism. We're going to get a better understanding for how different Hindus understand their tradition and how they claim that it is monotheistic, or they claim that it's pantheistic, etc., etc. So the first thing that we're going to talk about with the theology of Hinduism is our high god Brahman. So we were introduced to the idea of Brahman when we talked about myths of beginning. And Brahman, remember, is our high god, our capital G god in Hinduism. But Brahman is not necessarily to be thought of in the same way as like the Judeo-Christian God. Right? It's not a he or a she. This is not a personal God. This is not a God who's a creator of the world, or necessarily has like a personal relationship with people, in the sense of prayer and worship and things like that, and really intervening in human history. Those are things that we don't talk about with Brahman. We don't describe Brahman in that way, because Brahman is more of a force and an essence that pervades the universe. Brahman is the source of everything in the universe, and in a sense, Brahman is everything. So Brahman is the divine. Brahman is God. Brahman is the source of our world. God is the source of our world, and everything that we see is actually divine, is actually part of Brahman. So because of this overarching and sort of complicated way of understanding Brahman, there are two different ways of understanding Brahman. And that's what I have listed here, the Nirguna Brahman and Saguna Brahman. So we're going to go over what both of these are. Both are Brahman, but they're different ways of understanding Brahman. Because if Brahman is infinite, right, God is infinite, the divine is everything, then we can really say two equally true statements about God. We could say that we can't say anything true about God, right? Because every word or concept that we have to talk about God is finite, right? Because we are finite. We are not infinite. Nothing in this world is infinite. So all of the words and descriptions that we use about God, in some way they're imperfect, right? In some way they can't ever really truly capture what God is. So in one sense, we could say God is nothing, right? Because nothing that we say about God is true. Because God is always more than that. God is always beyond our understanding. But we could also say equally, if God is infinite, then God is everything, right? That we could say anything about God, and everything we say about God is true because God is infinite. So God has to be everything. So those two statements are what correspond to Nirguna Brahman and Saguna Brahman. Nirguna Brahman is Brahman without attributes, God without attributes or descriptions. This is the Brahman that we understand we can't really say anything true about, right? Because all words that we use are human words. They're human conceptions, human categories of thought, right? Words like good or bad, strong, powerful, all-knowing. These are words that people commonly ascribe to God, but Nirguna Brahman is an understanding that all of those words are untrue, because when we use those words, we are using them in the way that we know them in the world, right? If I say that God is good, when I think of the definition of good, I think of good things in my life, right? Things that I know that are good. But that's never completely true about God, because my understanding of good is so small compared to the goodness of God, right? What is actually true about God is so much more than what I could ever mean by the word good, right? Because when I think of good, I think of sleeping in late is good, helping out someone is good, being successful is good. Those are the things that I think of as good, because those are the good things in my life. Those are the good things in my world. But my world is finite, and God is infinite. So Nirguna Brahman is God without attributes. We could say really it is the understanding of God as void, God as nothing, God as a complete spirit, abstract, infinite. In a sense, this is also called the philosopher's God, because it is this acknowledgement that everything we say is less than God, because everything we say is not infinite, right? We can only use the finite to understand the infinite, and that can never work, right? This word that I have underneath here for Nirguna Brahman, or this phrase, neti neti, this is what is used to describe Brahman in the Upanishads, and it means not this, not this. So it means that as we go through the descriptions or the understandings of God, we can say certain things about God, but we should always remember, if I say God is good, I should always also remember neti neti, not this, not this. Because when I say God is good, that's untrue, because it's not true of my understanding of God, right? It's not true of my understanding of good. So all the words that we use to try to understand Brahman, they're just a little bit too short, right? They're never going to completely capture the essence, the true reality that is God. So Nirguna Brahman is Brahman without attributes. We could say it is Brahman in Brahman's own self. It is the true understanding of Brahman, and it is an understanding beyond all human comprehension, because God is beyond humanity. God is always more than what it means to be human. So Nirguna Brahman is in one sense, this is one way of understanding Brahman. The other way is Saguna Brahman. So if Nirguna Brahman is God without attributes, it is God with the infinity, canceling out all of our understandings of God. Saguna Brahman is the other expression of that. If God is infinite, it also means that everything we say about God is also true, right? Because God is everything. God is infinite. So Saguna Brahman is Brahman with infinite attributes, Brahman with infinite characteristics. Because the understanding in Hinduism is that that term infinite, the divine, is so much, and it's so much more than what we are. That means that we need multiple ways of understanding God. God is both everything and nothing at the same time. That may sound confusing, but this is the way that Hinduism is able to combine that unity and diversity at the same time and hold both of those in balance. So Saguna Brahman means also that if God is so beyond our understanding, then God can be represented in lots of different ways. So in Hinduism, there are said to be 330 million gods. That's what this term refers to down here. This comes from the Upanishads and the Vedas as well, that when someone asks how many gods are there in Hinduism, a guru answers there's 330 million. There are not actually 330 million gods in Hinduism. The number 330 million is meant to be sort of a symbolic number of infinity, right? That 330 million is such a large number that no one could possibly count that many. It's beyond our comprehension, right, of 330 million. The idea of the 330 million gods is that if God is infinite, if God is everything, he, she, it can also be represented or manifested in infinite numbers of ways. And that's what the Hindu gods correspond to. Each of the 330 million gods are understood to be or to represent one aspect of Brahman, one manifestation of Brahman. If God is everything, then God can also be understood through any of these individual gods and goddesses. So this is where we see that unity and diversity coming together. Saguna Brahman is God with infinite attributes. Those attributes are represented by the individual gods and goddesses in Hinduism. So on the one hand, there is one God, right? There is Brahman. Brahman is the true reality. Brahman is divine, infinite. On the other hand, we have 330 million gods. Both of these are true because actually the gods and goddesses are just 330 million ways of understanding, of representing, of trying to comprehend Brahman, the one high God, the one understanding, or the one true God, I should say. 330 million understandings, gods and goddesses, of the one true God, of Brahman. So we'll go over this again, and we can do a chat to talk about this if you have further questions. This is, again, as I said, one of the most difficult concepts to understand in Hinduism because it's so different from many Western traditions. It's so different from the monotheistic traditions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So Brahman is our high God, but there's more than one way of coming to an understanding of Brahman. Nirguna Brahman is God without attributes, right? Is God the void, the nothingness, the philosopher's God. And in a way, this is hierarchical. The understanding of many Hindus is that Nirguna Brahman is truly what Brahman is, right? Because truly everything we say about God is untrue. So really we should say nothing about God, right? Because God is always beyond our human words, our human thoughts, our human categories. But there's an understanding in Hinduism that Nirguna Brahman is not going to inspire love, is not going to inspire worship of human beings, right? As humanity, as human beings, we need something specific. We need a specific God that we can relate to, that we can fall in love with and worship. And that is a stepping stone to understanding Brahman. So all of the individual gods and goddesses within Hinduism, they are aspects of Brahman, they are manifestations of Brahman, and in a larger sense, they are like stepping stones. They are ladders to Brahman, right? I can't necessarily fall in love with nothing. I can't fall in love or worship a void or something, a God that I can't say anything about, right? I need a visual, specific representation of God. So I fall in love with Vishnu. I fall in love with Shiva. I fall in love with Saraswati. Those are some of the gods and goddesses we're going to learn about today. And then that helps me, that's sort of my little window onto the infinity, the vastness that is Brahman. But I first have to fall in love with an individual God before I can fall in love with Brahman, and that can help me to eventually understand that my Atman and Brahman are the same, okay? This is why I said in Hinduism is a path. It's a path towards moksha, but there are many steps on that path, and it takes not just one life to go through this path, it takes lifetime upon lifetime upon lifetime, right? As we're going through the wheel of samsara, we're going through life, death, and rebirth, we're gonna move farther down this path. We're all eventually gonna move all the way down this path, but we're all at different stages of it. Right? So some people are at the stage of worshiping an individual god or goddess. Some people are moving towards the stage of worshiping, or not worshiping, I should say. You don't necessarily worship Brahman. You understand that you are Brahman, right? That your personal Atman, your soul, is the same as Brahman. So these are our two understandings of Brahman, right? Nirguna Brahman, God without attributes. Saguna Brahman, God with infinite attributes. And those attributes are the gods and goddesses. They are represented, they are manifested by those gods and goddesses. So there's lots and lots of different gods and goddesses within Hinduism. And as I said, there's not really 330 million. That's sort of a symbolic number. But we're going to learn about a couple of the most important gods and goddesses in Hinduism. So these are the ones that we're going to learn about. And they're known as the Trimurti. So Trimurti is Trinity. So in Hinduism, even though there are lots of different gods and goddesses, and the Prathro chapter starts with him talking about Ganesh, or Ganesha, who's the elephant-headed god, we're going to focus on the ones that theologically are the most important. So the word Trimurti means Trinity. So Hinduism also has a trinity. If you're familiar with Christian theology, you know that there's also a trinity in Christianity. Hinduism has one as well. And traditionally, the Trimurti is Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So those are the three deities that I have written down here. But if you've read the Prothero chapter, you know that he says that actually that's the traditional Trimurti, but he says the new Trimurti is really Vishnu, Shiva, and Mahadevi, and that's based on popularity. So I want you guys to know both. So traditionally, theologically, the Trinity is comprised of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, but Brahma is not that popular anymore. Really, the three most popular gods and goddesses are Vishnu, Shiva, and Mahadevi. So first, let's talk about the traditional Trimurti. And it's important because of what it represents. So the Trimurti is the Trimurti. These are the three most important gods theologically because they represent the three aspects of divinity. So when we say that God is God, we usually mean that there are certain things that God can do that human beings cannot do. So there are three main powers of God, three main abilities of the divine. Those are creation, the creation of life, maintenance, maintaining or sustaining life, and destruction of life. Right? These are the three things that God can do. That is what makes God God. Right? These are the powers of the divine. And Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva are individual gods that each represent one aspect of that. So Brahma is the god of creation. Vishnu is the god of maintenance or sustaining. And we'll talk about what that means for him. And Shiva is the god of destruction. So it's important to know the traditional Trimurti because of what they represent in Hindu theology. Brahma is creation, Vishnu maintenance or sustaining of life, and Shiva is the god of destruction. So where Mahadevi comes in is that Mahadevi means the great goddess. And Mahadevi is not necessarily an individual god like Brahma, Vishnu, or Shiva. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva each have a female counterpart or wife. Different words are used sometimes to describe them. So sometimes they're referred to as their wives, sometimes their female counterpart, sometimes their female consort. But for each Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, there's a female goddess that sort of goes with them. So Brahma is Saraswati, Vishnu is Lakshmi, and Shiva has a few, but we're going to focus on Kali. So what Mahadevi is, as I said, Mahadevi means the great goddess, and Mahadevi is really the feminine aspect of the divine. Hinduism is quite unique as a religious tradition, or one of the ones that we'll study, in its emphasis of the feminine divine. So female goddesses and the female aspect of the divine have a strong role in Hinduism. So Mahadevi is this great goddess. She is the feminine divine. But as I said, she's not necessarily an individual goddess. She is represented by multiple female goddesses. So sort of in the same way that Brahman can be manifested or represented by all these different gods and goddesses, Mahadevi is more of an idea. As I said, the idea of the female divine. And she can be represented by many different female goddesses. So actually, each of the goddesses that we're going to learn about are Mahadevi. They are individual manifestations of Mahadevi. They are all the great goddess. So Saraswati is Mahadevi, Lakshmi is Mahadevi, and Kali is also Mahadevi. Prothero goes a little bit into this, but it's important to know that these female goddesses are all together understood to be Mahadevi, okay? So they are connected to that. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go through some of these individual gods and goddesses and how they represent different attributes of Saguna Brahman, right? Of Brahman with infinite attributes. Okay,